I've often thought about redigging the dyke. Keep Wales as it is now before it gets too polluted. I think people are definitely realising what the border's about again, rather than ignoring it like they used to. I remember my grandparents couldn't see the point in speaking Welsh and didn't, and lost their ability to speak Welsh in their younger years. I know my parents thought it was an absolute waste of time learning Welsh, and there was no point doing it in school. In fact, our primary school teacher refused to teach Welsh because she said it was a dead language. And I remember some of the schools that were deeper into Welsh, like Tarddle and stuff, they were still teaching Welsh. Some of my cousins and stuff that were going to that school, and it was like laughed upon. Why are you bothering with Welsh? Wales has almost completely disappeared, but it hasn't now. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that it's coming back.
There's quite often, when the river comes up and goes down, there's quite often plastics. And so we just wander around, and I happened to pull this bit of plastic the one day, because as it washes through, it uncovers more all the time. So yeah, I pulled the plastic out, and in amongst all of the sand and the leaf mould and stuff was like a nest. And it looked like a little nest of snakes, but it was lamprey, literally 2-3 inches long. So I was just very careful and put them back. And all of this beauty here, and all of the wildlife and the birds and the everything's, and then you just have to wander down the footpath and just look across, and you can see the sewage spewing out.
Brown.
And there's toilet paper in it, and there's sanitary products in it, and it happens every single time. And it looks like a load of brown water coming in.
And it's thick enough that, like to have it stays to one side of the river.
Yeah, you can see it travelling.
To the river.
Kind of means summer and peaceful, thoughtful moments. And swimming and fish. That's what it means to me.
Trip from Tredegar, just fish here for the day, It doesn't matter if we don't catch, it's just a pleasure being here, to be honest with you.
Also as well, but I found if we've had any problems at home, couldn't work or anything, you come up here and you forget about all.
Yeah, that's right.
All that, yeah.
Catch a fish is a bonus, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
it's just nice,
yeah.
Just nice to be on the river,
I'm not a George Monbiot who says during summer that the entire river stinks of chicken shit, which is a total lie. Like the lack of weed in the river, that came about after the lockdown of 2020, when people noticed there was no weed there and immediately blamed pollution, whereas in fact, as far as I'm concerned, the lack of weed was due to the record floods of 16th of February 2020, when the whole river, I think it rose 4 metres in under 24 hours, and that force of water going down the river just scoured the riverbed. Unfortunately, when you have, with climate change, etc., and you have incredibly high rainfall, which we have which we've had over the past month or so. With that volume, I'm afraid, even trying to slow it down, you're not onto a winner there.
Hello, I'm from South Africa, but we live in Buckinghamshire.
We're from the coast originally, Swansea.
My family's based in Herefordshire.
In some ways I feel a fraud for all my involvement with the river, because people say, increasingly I'm known as in association with the river, but I haven't lived here my whole life, so I haven't had that relationship with it from childhood. I can't talk about how it was 30 years ago. But what really happened was I moved here, I had children, and then we were in lockdown because of COVID-19, and obviously we couldn't go to London and protest about climate-related things. We couldn't go and talk about the ecological crisis. And suddenly there was one on my doorstep where this river goes green. And I was just in shock that something so close that I'd completely taken for granted, was just a lovely part of this landscape, was under such threat. So there had been algal blooms on the Wye before, intermittently. What was strange and what was new was that there were now algal blooms brewing right up in the headwaters that had always run clear. And what Simon Evans from the Wye Foundation was saying was the only thing in that landscape has changed is that intensive poultry has moved in. And that's the kind of only thing that could really explain this change in water quality. And he was explaining that because algae multiplies as it grows, the higher up you start, the more chance it has to multiply and the worse the bloom can get downstream. The keystone species of the river is ranunculus, also known as water crowfoot, which is this white flowering plant. It's a kind of river weed. It's the key habitat and food source for much of the web of life in that river. So losing it, deprives other animals of their food and habitat. It represents a much bigger vanishing and a much bigger threat. And there's no official measurements of what we've lost, but experts say it's over 90% of it. My understanding is that the floods are getting worse, but that's not just linked to climate change, because the rainfall alone doesn't explain the severity of flood that's happening. If water flashes more quickly off the landscape because we've changed things about it, for example, more sheep on the hills over winter is a change. If you're compacting the land more and the water rushes off, basically there's a high risk of flooding. So my understanding is the floods kind of knocked out some of the root system of the ranunculus, and the algae suppresses its growth. So obviously when the algae is there, it's shading out like light from the river, so that suppresses the growth. But now there's this like algal film that's almost stopping the ranunculus from flowering, so when it's trying to get going, it's being suppressed. And Simon Evans recently said to me he's wondering if we've actually flipped the ecosystem of the river from a plant-dominated ecology to an algae-dominated ecology. Once you start looking at the river, you realise the story of a river is the story of the land, is the story of us, and it was what we were doing that was changing the river. So as I learned more about how farming practices were influencing the river, I could see in microcosm issues that I'd been reading about at a national and international level, but it was all playing out here if I actually paid attention.
I'm a lorry driver, so it's about fixed about at the weekend. Yeah, with animal feed, we've got to feed animals. I used to live at Winford and I used to walk the Wye for 6 months when I had a broken arm. Yeah, I lost a lot of weight. I kept spotting the otter. He was about there all the time. I did catch it in the end, but you've got to be downwind to catch him. If the wind's going that way and he smells you, he's gone.
At this time of year, when the river levels are high, there's not a lot to see on the river itself. So I might go up to Pushpatty, the other side of Glaisbury, and look on the flood ponds around there. This week I saw 8 curlew there, which are the first curlew I've seen back in the area, because they winter on the coast. Curlew used to be very widespread. They've been pushed up onto the remaining bits of unimproved hill land, and then they're subject to predator, crow, fox, everything, which impacts upon them much more than it would if there was a larger population. The BTO research for this grid square, as it were, shows that we've lost 8 species. Well, actually I've seen 3 of those in the area, so I don't think they're lost completely. Widgeon and teal, for instance. And then on the other side, we gained probably up to 11 species with mandarin and egrets, great white egret. We get sandpipers, ring plovers. I've even seen oyster catchers. I think that a lot of the changes related to the fact that what would have been considered prey species in the past that would have been persecuted by gamekeepers, fishermen and so forth, now have a lot more scope, and so they become more widespread.
My first definite knowledge of the spirit world was when I was 10, and it actually was to do with animals. And it's only now, as an adult looking back, that I realise I was probably having quite a few mediumistic experiences, but just didn't realise it didn't have the vocabulary that you don't when you're a child. It's interspecies communication, so a dog, a cat, a horse, a bird, it could communicate in a way into my mind that I understand. And when I first started practising communication, I was working with animals, even just the swan, I'd be like just sending this energy just to see what would happen, and suddenly they'd stop in their tracks and look and think, oh, they felt something. I am vegetarian, so sometimes there's a bit of internal conflicts. We've been on a farm. And I'm forever walking past the cows and apologising, and the sheep and apologising. Which in fact you and I were only discussing, I was discussing with you the other day, that it does pull on my soul.
Well, we have, I'd say, a harmonious conflict with each other, because I'm probably the least spiritual person. I do breed animals for slaughter.
I've been trying to educate you.
Not proud of the whole outline, but I'm quite proud of what I do here. I think they're good animals. Or perhaps I've got a bit more empathy now than I used to. It's not going to stop me producing food, but probably care a little bit more now than I used to.
And you don't have the dogs in kennels anymore? They live indoors.
Yeah, I don't know.
Have you got feral cats that I feed?
The dogs are okay in the kennels, Derek, my father, was born in the house not long after they moved, so Derek was born in 1937, so within 10 years of them being here. And lasted until 2 years ago. God bless him. It's okay, it's a hungry farm. The river makes it a hungry farm. There's a bit of a local old wives' tale, which David on the hill likes to remind me every year of that the Wye takes from the Derry and gives to Langooey, which is Mark Jones Davis on the other side of the river. I think I'd rather have it that way round than be flooded every year. Yeah. It's more expensive, I suppose. Perhaps the fence upkeep at Langooey negates the cost of having all my nutrients dropped on this soil. I think we all need to try and resist the push into more factory farming. And I think chickens would be a prime example, but also beef is trying to go that way. We're just producing peas in a pod then, really. Because you haven't bred it yourself, you wouldn't have the same pride in the end result. I think it would be a big loss. Yeah, I don't want a shed full of identical Aberdeen Angus things to suit a supermarket, which is where it's going.
Well, in my work life, I'm a palliative care nurse, so I look after people who are dying. So it's that circle of life stuff, getting it in perspective. It's okay, we live and we die, and it all keeps going.
There's too many incomers. I don't want to sound like a redneck, but there just is. Just join in. You know, you get people, you know, walking down the streets, don't even look at you, don't even say hello. You can't afford to buy a place because it's you know, a lot of holiday homes, a lot of this, a lot of that. Having to move out because you're squeezed out. You know what I mean? I find it all, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's too big for my brain to sort of take on board. But it just makes me want to dig my heels in even more. And, you know, I want my kids to grow up where I grew up because I think it's a wonderful part of the world.
Shit hit the fan in personal life, big time. And long story short, found myself stood on top of a bridge. The highest fucking bridge possible, looking down at the water. And the water stopped me getting closer. So I walked away from it and knew that it was time to change. So I moved back to my hometown here and ended up in someone's house, stuck in the back room, trying to work out what it was all about. Then someone said, do you want to try kayaking? I thought, shit, yeah, that sounds good. Let's jump in a boat. Let's go on the river. It sounds cool. Looks cool. Everyone else seems to have lots of fun. Let's do it. Jumped in the boat and straight away, oh my word, absolutely fucking hated it. So when I managed to get to the bank, I had a sigh of relief, but found there was something about that moment that was special. When I was on that water, hating not being in control in that water, I wasn't thinking about the shit. I was only thinking about being there and what it felt like to be there. That was 16 years ago and over 9,000 days on the water teaching people. My purpose is to teach on that river. So the progression of being around the water for me personally is phenomenal.
because there is then a further connection that is developed with the true masters of nature, and that is the animals that exist within. How those animals treat their environment. And if you tap into how those animals treat that environment, the environment becomes a whole different place. There's been 5 times in 20 years of this where I wanted to walk away from what it was. And specifically one day, I was further upriver above Landstephen there, and I had no energy to teach the group, I just couldn't, and I told them to paddle away from me. So I'm sat in an eddy, and I'm looking at the flow, and there's this log comes down the flow, and turns into my eddy, sits right next to me, and puts his face up next to my boat. There's an otter. And I'm looking at the otter otter's looking at me. Otter swims away, and I go straight to my clients. Where's my clients? What's happening? How are they feeling? What are they doing? So pretty much the otter has presented itself to me when I do not want to do this anymore. And every time I see that otter, there's nothing that will stop me doing it at all. It happens about once a year. I cry every summer, and I'm about to cry when I see the rocks covered in oxygen bubbles. I hold back tears constantly with my clients when I see that change. The day I look up a river and I see a bronze haze, and I turn my boat side onto the flow, and within 20 seconds, the side of my boat is brown, and you see swans with brown tide marks. When you have spent this amount of time on that water, you know it's changed. The rocks are covered in sludge. When the river drops, you see a brown rock, you turn it over and it will reveal its true colour. Every single rock. And year after year after year it gets worse and worse and worse. But nature, being the most amazing thing that it is not moaning about it. It can't, it's adapting. But they've changed, they've adapted to do so. Now the otters are still here, the kingfishers are still here, the swans are still here, they're still here. It's got a chance, but it's going to take time.
I'd noticed how seasons are disappearing a little bit and they're all blending into one another, and yeah, no, I mean, certainly the last five years or so, there's certainly a lot more flooding happening, a lot more rainfall.
Yeah, I think about it. I think about the what the world will be like for the kids and stuff, you know, for sure.
Will must have been two and a quarter when we moved in. Went for a walk up the dingle, and Dave, the landlord, we didn't know, stuck his head out of the window and said, "Oh, you've just moved in, haven't you? You know, heard you've got a little boy. What's his name? How old he is? Bring him up to us on Christmas Eve because Father Christmas comes." And we went, and when we opened the door, it was just full of kids. We'd not seen a kid in the village, and when Father Christmas arrived, every single kid in that room had a named and age-appropriate present. It was just wonderful. You know, in a village that's split by the A470, seemingly nothing happens. There's a real community here. Apart from the sirens, we don't hear the road. It's just water, just water. So being able to, Will would come home from school, primary school, whatever, we would literally come down and both of us would just swim across the river. The dogs swimming with us. I was just well, one dog, the other one stood on the shore and wouldn't go in the water. But that was lovely, but it's changed. I won't go into that river now. If I walk down to the confluence there, you've got the Cleto coming down and it's more or less clear. And the little fish, the little fry from the main river are gathering around it, almost like life force. I've noticed a decline in fish, in insect life, in birds. It's just not there. That something so huge and so special to so many people is being let and allowed to die is just tragic. Going up to the Wales on rugby days, I'm sure Wales is it. It's Welsh, but it's not that bastion. I think other things in Irwood are more important. I've used the LYFC as example because there's such a sort of competition. You'll get farming families split. The cousins in one farm and the cousins in the other farm go to different YFCs, and the division is the hill in between them. That's it. These hills and valleys, the shape of the landscape here particularly drives the territories, the belongings, the changes, the loyalties, the affiliations, all of it. I drove my parents down to Little Week's holiday in Cornwall last week, and I love it when you drive into England, but you say it as a Lloegr, the Lost Lands. Because we were there, but we've come to hide. And I say we, there's that Welsh identity, it's thousands of years on, but you do feel it, there's a safety and security in small place. And the river runs through it, so the river sees it all. Like I remember writing to somebody once, I said, I'm throwing wishes into the Wye now, and with any luck and a fair wind, it should be on the shores by tea time.
Well, I've been here 42 years, but I used to live on Llanfairpwllgwyngyll, Llanfairpwllgwyngyll Hill, that's a couple of miles away. Father had a farm there, small holding like, he wasn't farm, he was working in a sanatorium in the hospital, and before that he was working in forestry, on the Forestry Commission. But it wasn't big enough to make a living. See, it was only 28 acres. That's what happened there. And we're one of 10 children, we all brought up there, 10 of us. We're all still alive. Yeah. Well, I'm old, I'm retired now, see. Yeah, I don't do much now. Always some of the fiddle at home, but I don't work anywhere now. Keep a few goats up here and chickens. What a bit of everything, like cattle, cow. You couldn't keep them all at the same time, When you had a horse, you didn't have a cow, you know what I mean? You had one or the other, None of the ground I didn't to keep anything much. All my life since I was 15, since once I learned, I went as apprentice then at 15, but ever since then, I've been stonemason, and self-employed, On motorways, you see a couple of mile of wall in, there's a good chance if it's no more than 40 mile away, it'll be me and my gang done that, more than likely, Yeah, we worked all over the place, under trees, all over the place. There's a bit of wall there as you go to Bullough now, on the left as you go up, A couple of pieces there, I haven't moved from here, travelling every day, Oh, this is a lovely place to live, really, Quite tidy, there's no blacks here. We're all white people around here, Not there's no harm in them, but I mean, it's not here. They're all white, you know. Because there's no harm in the black. But, Emigrated to Canada, me and missus, with 2 children, took them over. Stayed there for 7 months. I didn't like it much. It was so hot in the summer, and then you're about fucking frozen in the winter, you know. So about Christmas time we come back. I couldn't see the sense of it, you know. I went over there twice, moose hunting, you know, after that, shooting moose. Never had a bug of mine, you know, never had one. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Looking for moose. That's the trouble, I never went there after in the summer, see, because when you go moose hunting, it's in the autumn, like, you know, by then it's cold, like. About starve waiting for a moose to come by, like. It didn't appeal to me too much. I used the shooting I done was after foxes, like, when we'd be walking miles, you would be waiting for them to come by, like, you know, so you kept warm, like. You know, the boys used to poach a bit and something years ago, you know, when there was hundreds of salmon around. Never entertained that, but it bothered me. Never done it, you know. No, never did. Nobody do it now because they know, like, it's bugger all fish, like, you wouldn't want to kill them, you know. Like, most poachers wouldn't want to wipe the thing out, would they? You know. I remember him jumping down behind over in there. There's a bit of a fall there behind that pub there. And you could see him going up all the fall, you know. Oh, it's not a very big pool. Big as this room, plus a bit bigger. You see 13 big trout, salmon in there, man. Going round and round and they jump up the fall, you know. But I haven't seen that for years, man. That's all gone. I was just interested to watch them going up the fall, you know. It would have been nice if they'd still been there when my grandchildren was about, you know. To show them, like, you know.
The whole of my life when I was a kid in Rossilli, doors flew off tractors, you know, gates would slam on you, and the whole time you couldn't hear anyone. And sheep would like run and they'd jump in the air and then they'd land over there. And everything was bent over and everything was hunched and you felt like the whole of the weather was pressing down on you. And I had a grandma who, like, she ran the farm during the Second World War because her husband died. She looked after the farm till Dad was old enough to farm it, and he took it on when he was 13. And she used to tell me about the wreckers, and they were in our family. And there was no train. Nobody went from Rossilli to Swansea. It was very, very isolated. So my idea of Wales was going to the cliff, looking out to sea, dreaming, imagining the sailors, imagining the wreckers. We had a shepherd called Vaughan, and my grandfather, Farmer One, had gone to Hereford Market and bought Vaughan from Radnorshire. And just the way it worked out, Dad would always put me with Vaughan. So when I came here, it was like yows and everything. I was like, oh my God, I've come home. I came up here because you don't feel so exposed like you are in Gower. Because when you're in Gower, it's that limestone peneplain, isn't it? Everyone can see where you're walking. Everybody in Rossilli knows exactly what we're farming. Here you can go anywhere, nobody sees you. My father, he calls it Trumpton up here. He says, how's it going in Trumpton? Because he thinks it's like a little toy town. I kind of told him about the chicken farms in 2013 because I used to have to drive a lot and I could see them. And he was really funny. He said, oof, I'd never do that. I said, why not, Dad? He said, because you're going to be in a financial relationship with Cargills. And if things go wrong, they'll take you out like that. And so I think the pollution in the Wye is like an indicator of how this area, for all its sleepiness, has kind of opened out to wider geopolitical forces. And I think it's really, really important that, as well as the pollution, we look at that. How are farmers going to make their money, and can they make money, and what is the culture? The farmers on this land now, but how they're on this land and how they make that profit is not just the farmer's responsibility, it's everybody who buys food, everybody who wants a cheap chicken. You know, my dad is a product of his generation, really intensive farmer. Finally, the nephew's taken over, and we've taken the sheep off the cliff, and we only graze them now for 6 weeks instead of from January through to May. And in 1 year, we've had orchids, we've got heather. And that's the one thing I think we should all go around doing, is look at where it's working, look at where it's coming back, because when it comes back fast. Don't you feel?
I'm not dead against the turbines really, but they're putting the pylons up and putting the turbines on this hill to take the electric all the way down to Carmarthen. So we're not going to benefit, you know. And it's going to be the pylons are going to be terrible. You know, look at the valley, it's a beautiful valley, isn't it? My point is, why don't they put turbines down there on the hills there and not take it all the way from here? But if you refuse, they'll take it compulsory, won't they? I've been 79, I've been here 79 years. Yeah, born in the house. Yeah. Father fished the river. Yeah, for trout, for salmon. And oh, there's nowhere near the fish in there. Nowhere near. You don't see them jumping like you used to. I think it's all this sewerage going in up above you by Bullough. That's going in every day. You got all washing up liquid in there, and you got all this toilet stuff in it. And when it floods, when the river floods, we got a field by the bridge in Bullough, and when it backs up, the sewerage is all pouring out on the footpath in our field, and then when it goes back down, there's about 4 or 5 inches of sewerage. So they're polluting the river, aren't they? Not the farmers. No, we can't now on the Ministry, Agriculture, we can't spread muck on these certain months of the year now, and you can't so many metres from the river, but it's not the ordinary muck, the straw muck and all that. It's these chicken and slurry. That's liquid, isn't it? Yeah, and there's chicken sheds everywhere. 3, 4 gone up here now, just above. There's a farmer up the valley, he got chicken houses up in Newbridge, but he hauls the muck all down here, and I think he tips it on the hill actually, up above his house, but yeah, loads and loads and loads of it. So when it rains, where's that juice going? Back down the valley? Farmers used to be paid to drain all the ground. You don't see, like we used to see when I was 17, I suppose. You'd see peaweeds and you'd see curlews, nothing. They've all gone. Yeah. Because when Father was doing it, you'd mow your hay in middle of July. Now it's June, when the birds are nesting. So in July they're mostly gone. Hatched and gone. Used to be peaweeds all up on that hill up here. No grouse. They've gone. For what reason up there, I don't know. I love to see curlews. I love to see her. Yeah, but they're gone. It's gone this last 20 years. Yeah. Like, yeah. But what makes me mad is, well, they protect the auks, and then you feed your young birds on the garden table, and then you look around and there's a bloody hawk taking a robin or something like that. Well, that makes me mad, that do. Yeah. Small birds eat all the insects and caterpillars and everything. What do hawk do? Nothing. Eat young birds.
We came from south, High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire, for a 1 week holiday. First time to Wales. We came by driving. The landlord where we live encouraged us to come in Wales.
Because he lives here, so
yeah, he lives here.
The place. He said it's really nice nature and scenery, and we can see the nature here is amazing.
Yeah, and
we've been yesterday to the waterfalls. It was amazing, so we don't have these things in High Wycombe there.
We've been here for around 2 to 3 months now, and we just moved here to work in the whole area of Powys.
Do you remember where was? Oh, actually, before I was in Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes in so quite the contrast to Bilf, you know, hustling, bustling city with casinos, restaurants, bars, McDonald's, which Bilf doesn't have or anywhere nearby. So
which is good. But the quality of life,
because Burger King's better.
Yeah, better quality of life I found in Bilf, because before I was near London, Essex area, I've noticed better quality of life here in Bilf. People can go out to the park more. You have more walks. There's more green spaces. There's lakes.
Friendlier people.
It's just better.
I live in Cardiff. I moved there 10 years ago for love, and then I stayed because Cardiff is great. So, yeah, I love Cardiff. It's awesome, and Wales in general is such a nice place. I just bought a van, so we're traveling in the van, and Wales is the best place to do that, isn't it? You have the coast everywhere and the mountains and so much nature. It's so beautiful here. Our families come from Brittany, the French Brittany. Yeah, there's a lot of similarity. I think my nan, who was from Brittany, she tried to speak with my ex, who could speak Welsh, and they could kind of understand each other, you know. And I think it was really cute. Yeah. I think here in Wales they really try to develop the Welsh language and the Welsh culture, but they didn't really do that in France. And I think you have to learn Breton in the school until a certain age, like here until GCSE. But no one really speaks it. It's very rare. It really died down, and yeah, that's a shame, isn't it? But
just after COVID finished, and my first trip here, I was fishing up on the Aberpool, which is where the Irvine comes into the Wye about, and nobody else on the river. And just out the corner of the eye, I saw this huge animal sort of surface and go back down, and I thought it was a seal. I sat there for about 10 minutes first, seeing if it came back up again. It didn't, so I rang the bailiff, and I said, "I know you think I'm going to be stupid here, but I'm sure I've just seen a huge seal in the Aberpool." And he laughed. He said, "I saw it yesterday." He said, it's the biggest dog otter I've seen on the river for 50 years. It was massive, and it obviously had thrived and come up the river because nobody was on the river. You weren't allowed to go fishing during lockdown, and he was sat in there and he'd munched away on a fair few fish. The fishing took a bit of time to come back. It's very difficult to tell, isn't it? And we all have rose-tinted spectacles of what things were like when we were younger, don't we? In every avenue of life, we think things were better then. I mean, I can only say from my own personal thing, fishing the river for the last 20 years, or 17 years, I can't remember which it is now, but there's just as many fry and things in the river when you're sat there throwing in your little bit of sandwich and you see them coming up, you know, when the fish aren't biting. It's just full of fry. And I think the fact that you've got so many of the predator birds on the river shows how healthy the fish stocks are. You wouldn't have all these kingfishers if there wasn't food for them. A couple of cormorants just flew over there. Things. So the cormorants are on here, and the goosanders. There's plenty of goosanders, which have, you know, they've got a vast appetite for small fish. The one species of fish that has gone downhill on the Wye, obviously, is the salmon. I think it was 1988-89. There were nearly 7,000 salmon caught on the river by rod and line anglers. And then it dropped off a cliff. 1989, it dropped off a cliff and it went down to about 2,000 the following season. And then it's been a gradual decline all the way through now. And we're down to about somewhere between 300 and 500 now for the last 5 years. Well, it dropped off a cliff way, 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 way before all the chicken farms came to Powys and stuff. So even though they're trying to blame that, it can't be that. Whether it's overfishing out in the estuaries, possibly climate change. We seem to have very wet winters and very dry summers. You know, the water's not there for them to get up because they're not getting up here and they're struggling to get up here. Maybe not breeding as well because they all breed in the upper Wye. The grayling population up here, and grayling are sort of a barometer of good water. They won't take any sort of bad water. It's strong in the river in the upper reaches, so you know it would seem to indicate that the upper reaches are quite reasonable. I've spoken to anglers who are down in the lower Wye, and they say it's almost stagnant down there with no flow and things. I can understand why there might be a problem down there with stagnant water and algae and stuff. But those of us who are on the river a lot, and I confess I'm on far too much, you know. I mean, I fish this river all the way from here, all the way down to the other side of Hereford for various species of fish at various times of the year. And I can honestly say I've never seen the river looking any worse than it's looked in the last 20 years when I've been fishing it. The fish are there in numbers. The wildlife seems to be thriving. There's obviously problems. I'm not a scientist. There's obviously problems, but you know, it's certainly not the funeral of the river. You know, it's certainly not on its death throes at all.
I come here because when I go from that gate and I come all the way down, came to the beach, and I go, it's like you've got a headache. You walk through here, it's like magical, man. Because by the time you walk back out again, you know, you're clear. You feel, you know, you're refreshed.
Couple of conversations I had with people from the fishing community, I did get a little bit rattled when it's either people who've moved here recently or somebody who's very young. You know, I've got some 30-year-old mansplaining to me what the river's like and that it's fine, you know, and that
and being over dramatic or whatever. But I'm now wondering whether did I stand in the river with bullheads and minnows and sticklebacks nibbling my feet, loads of them, and gaze into the river and see trout and salmon. You could see them. You could see to the bottom of the river. And I wonder if I dreamt that. Was it that? Yeah, it was actually. It bloody was. And so, yeah, when somebody's saying to me, oh, it hasn't changed that much, well, fuck off, it has. Because I promise you, when I was 5, all of that happened. And it's not happening now. I think I can go back about 5 generations in the village. All fishermen, all carpenters, really imaginative bunch. They're all called Tom. I'm not. And so that was my upbringing. Was not my parents particularly. I think my parents quite rebelled from that country life. We lived in a council house. It was a very quite an austere upbringing compared to what was going up at my grandparents', which was Grandad used to take me wiring rabbits and poaching salmon. And it was my nan actually. She would notice everything, and that was her treasure. That actually was her legacy to me. We'd walk around, we'd come around a corner, and I don't know, a primrose would be out, or and she'd go. It'd be this intense joy to find this plant or this thing growing, or this view, or how the light was on that water, or she didn't articulate it verbally even. If you were to ask people in the village if there was an emblem of the community, what would it be? And I think they would say it was the river. People my age, anyway. Play and just being, which happened a lot certainly around the river, is a really connecting experience. We were all in the river in the summer. Yeah, we'd have rope swing off a tree that into this deep pool, and be lined up, just like 20 teenagers lined up on the riverbank, just everyone swimming and leaping in. And so there's a lot of noise, and probably drove the fish mad, Now I don't really walk up the river anymore, so I actually find it, even up here where it's quite clean, I actually find it quite distressing. Our little monkey minds are always we're always doing something. So we're going swimming, or we're going for a picnic, or we are going for a walk, or whatever. But actually, there's a much deeper thing going on, because we are being. And when you play, you're being, because you're forgetting. When you swim, you are being. You see it when people are on the river, and I'm just suddenly drawn to mind of a photograph. It's one of the few photographs of me as a kid, because nobody had a camera. But there's this one that I'm with my dad and my brother, and we're on the river, and we're walking along the riverbank, and everyone's looking down, and I am particularly, I've got a foot outstretched and my arms out. I'm obviously balancing. I'm really looking at what I'm doing. Everyone's looking down, and I noticed this on the beach, that how people walk. So they get out of their car in the car park, right? Stride purposely to where they decide they're going to sit, and then they get all set up, and then they start walking around the beach, and their body language just changes, and they go into a meditation. You can actually see it physically happen, and I've spent hours just watching that and recording that. I find it fascinating, and everyone does it. People walk completely differently on a beach.
The badger met my old man walking across the bridge, was on the bridge lower down right opposite the turn for Landrinder. They were only like 2 planks like this, and then they were swung on 2, well, it was a bit like the Forth Road Bridge, but it was a small thing made of wire and wood, like. And he got up on the side and left the badger go across because the badger was coming, whatever.
One of my boys really had the idea to go into poultry from when he was about 15 years old. So he waited a while, he went to college, he went to university, and then came back home to farm, and then the second son came back as well. So then, at that point, as I said, because the farm was then going to need to provide an income for 3 generations and 3 or 4 family units, we needed to look at ways of it providing enough income to sustain us all. At that point with his father, because his father was still alive, they started looking at different systems and different poultry operations. You'll either have poultry farmers who are egg producers, or you'll have poultry farmers who are meat producers. We've stuck with the meat producing. The maximum that you'll have in a shed is around the 40,000. We've currently got 3 sheds, but don't ask me the floor space that's in because it's huge. When we built our first shed, my father was a builder, so I thought he'll love to see this shed. So I actually drove him around the inside of the shed in the car. That's how big it is. Our chickens are not free range, but the environment in which they live is very carefully monitored and controlled to ensure that they've got the absolute best conditions, because humans are the same as any other species. If all our needs are being met, usually we're healthier, we thrive, we're happier. And from a farmer's perspective, you need your animals to be well looked after. So it's very mechanised, how much water they need each day, how much feed they need each day, depending on their age. What the heat should be depending on their age, how much humidity there should be in the shed, how much, what sort of ventilation. So that is controlled by computer, but it needs a human to program all of that in and also to monitor it, because it's monitored and measured constantly. We talk a lot about sustainability. Sustainability is about ensuring that we don't waste all the resources we have, either by spoiling air quality, water quality, but it's also got to be sustainable in terms of it needs to provide a living that will support those people staying on the land and farming it. Inputs have risen for all sorts of reasons that are pretty well documented. And that puts any business under enormous pressure. Energy costs, feed costs, fuel costs. Inflation in agriculture last year, the year before, was something like 25%. And, the other pressure we've got, along with every other business or anybody else that's, is high interest rates. If you've invested in your business, you've got borrowed money, high interest rates make a big difference. Company that we sell chicken to or grow chicken for they work with their growers, so it's very much a partnership. In other aspects of the farming, for example, the beef or the sheep, again, other supermarkets are available, but if you are supplying Waitrose, you will have certain conditions you have to meet, but also you will have certain guarantees. And one of those particularly can be around the price you will be paid. So it does give you that stability, because otherwise you're very much reliant on the price you can get on the day in the market, which can depend on so many factors, not least of which is how many buyers happen to be there. You know, animals that are outside, and it's not just chickens, it's cattle, sheep, they will have an impact because they are booing on the ground. With our chickens, that chicken manure is only ever taken out and applied where it's needed. It's not sort of just on the ground and then it rains on it and it runs through it. So in that respect, we've got total control over where it goes and what happens to it and where it's used. I don't think there's any substitute for actually meeting people, because it's easy to be angry about somebody when you're on Facebook or Twitter or something like that, and you see a comment. But when you actually meet that person and find out that they're not the horrible person they've been painted to be, and perhaps to listen to their side of it and understand their aspect of it, and we've got to work together, because ultimately I think we do all want the same thing, but there are very contrasting views about how we get to that final end point.
I used to do a lot of fishing, and a friend, the son of a friend of ours came, who was very keen to fish. This was about 20 years ago. And he came home having caught a pair of false teeth. Well, my mother rose to the occasion and insisted that it was entered in the fishing book. I can't fish anymore, a great shame. Well, not from the point of view of the fish, it isn't.
We're lucky here that we're above the chicken farms by and large, and so the river is much cleaner here. We've got dippers, we've got all the other water birds that you would expect to find. And we've had various universities do studies here as well, and they found in a quadrat, they found 69 little lampreys. It's one of those things that you can't always see it from the house, but it's ever present because of the way that the geography here is, where this is such a pinch in the geology with the road, the river, the railway, the Wye Valley Walk, all of these pathways that are essential and have been essential for thousands of years, ever since people first came to the area. I'm always very conscious when I look out of the depth of history and the depth of human history that's here. And with the river being the ultimate cause of the valley.
What do you reckon, John? What do you reckon about trying to stop farming? What do you reckon about them trying to stop the farming?
Stop what farming?
They're trying to stop farms, aren't they? Like cattle and all that. Like the activists.
Well, that's absolutely ridiculous.
Exactly. We wouldn't cope without farms at the end of the day. It's
no farms,
meat.
no food.
Exactly, no farms, no food. But,
So 5 years ago I decided to see if I could meet the cost of my own existence through production. I decided to see whether I could feed myself. We've got 8 acres. We had goats when I was a kid, so I was probably more in touch with some of the processes of food production than a lot of people would be, I suppose. But the process of answering that question has been one of the most brutal, beautiful, life-changing experiences that I can conceive of. One of the things that has changed for me significantly over the last 5 years is a sort of spiritual traction with the world. I understand now why it is that we live in a secular society, and I think it's not because we have a greater grasp of physics, it's because we are detached from birth and death. Mechanisation has separated us from the need to ask questions. I had a set of twins this spring. She was much the stronger, but they were both weak. They were both small. I didn't believe he'd live. I helped him live. I helped them both live. I went round and did all the rest of the rounds with them all, came back, and she'd lost the ability to suck. And I fed them both for the next 2 or 3 days on a constant rotation. They can hardly take anything at that age. But the stronger of the two never regained the ability to suck, and then drowned, really, as she was trying to feed a couple of days into the process. The boy, who was just tiny, just an absolute bag of bones, always maintained that ability and lived. You wonder what connection it is that we have to life that means that one soul makes it and continues, and another goes back to the earth. And where do they go back to? Because our souls are they're not just a collection of cells. You see that very much when you're rearing the animals in such an individual and hands-on way. There is something to a soul, and it goes somewhere.
I was born in the house at the bottom next to the bridge.
Bridge End buildings.
Yeah, one of the Bridge End buildings. My parents lived there. They ran a cafe and a bed and breakfast place. I think it was a cyclist place.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then when I was 6 months old, I moved across the bridge to the house the other side in Reda. We lived there for a while. I don't know, I can't remember now. 15 years perhaps, and then moved to the other end of the block. And then when I got married, I moved up street for 18 months and then came back to Cumtaitha. So I haven't travelled very far at all. My family now, of course, are all over the place. My daughter in particular.
Yes.
She moves every 2 or 3 years to a different country. School holidays, you went to the river kind of thing. You either went to build something down by the river or you went swimming if it was warm enough kind of thing. And I think now they talk about pollution, the sewerage in Reda, there was no sewerage works, it ran into the river. Because our house, the other side of the bridge, there was a sewerage pipe going out kind of thing into the river, and the sewerage came out there and it was always fish at the end of the pipe. And my father used to say, if you were going fishing, don't go fishing there, you don't want those old chub there at the end of the sewer. You don't want them to eat. But I mean, they're saying it's pollution. Well, that pollution doesn't exist anymore. The only pollution now is from agriculture, isn't it? We used to go and build dams and that down on the Grow. I suppose it was to do with the dams up here. We'd build our dams. I remember us being there, a gang of us from school, when we were in Cumtaitha school. And one of the lads had got detonators from the quarry. And we let this detonator off and an aeroplane blew up. It was during the war. And we thought we'd done it. So we'd better run back to school and make sure we're in school when they say, well, who did that? I think they were all killed, and I remember we went afterwards. They were bringing the remains down off the hill kind of thing and bringing them down to the main road. So we all had to go up and look at these remains to see if the pilots were still in it. A lot of boys of my generation, their families were from the Hay-on-Wye Valley.
People had to move out and had no money, did they?
No, that's right, there was no compensation.
No, the landowners had the compensation, but they didn't give any to their tenants, same as in the Epint or in Tryweryn and that. Well,
and I think today it would be impossible.
Well, people are more knowledgeable now, aren't they?
Yes, they would blow it up now. I mean, they did away with all the manholes up here when they were burning the cottages down because they were worried that somebody was going to drop a bomb into the pipeline.
Well, like 130 years ago, like people living in the Hay-on-Wye Valley, they would probably just do as they were told then.
Yeah.
You had to have someone to start up a revolt or whatever.
When I was in school, in Reda School, which was a primary school, I I never went into the top class because the headmaster, they built Brynterian School, and the headmaster went there because the children from the Hay-on Valley couldn't speak English. Because the Hay-on Valley School was all Welsh.
Oh, yeah.
2.5 miles, 3 miles up the road.
But I think there's very few people in the Hay-on Valley who speak Welsh now. Don't know of anybody.
No, they hadn't drummed out of them, really. I remember Cliff giving a talk down at Carrad, I think it was. Why don't you speak Welsh, Cliff? Well, I went to Darnall.
Oh, yes, school.
It was like Darnall College. I went to Darnall College, and you had the cane if you spoke Welsh there.
We like coming back here. Although we live up in Hampshire now, and I'm a Welshman, it's like coming back home.
It's more friendly. The people are more friendly, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they definitely feel a bit safer here.
Yeah, yeah. And
just walking around like this. You know, I probably wouldn't do this in Hampshire.
No. At the moment, we got one of the hotels is rented out to illegals. That's all I'll say. And we got demonstrations going on everywhere, so it's unsafe. You don't know where you're able to walk around, where you're going to be safe, but.
It's a nature reserve, I suppose, of two halves. At its heart, you've got a series of meadows grazed as pastures, which is fairly conventional, you know, light grazing, summer grazing. And then you've got hillside that effectively was rewilded by the Trust long before that was fashionable. We've got heathland, long grass and scruffiness, tree cover and scrub at much higher density than you'd be used to seeing these days. And actually we're now in a position where, you know, that's sort of signalling what is possible and what's needed if we're going to carry on farming, producing food, but also addressing the climate emergency and the nature crisis. I think the thing is, rewilding has become a toxic word because people think it's about abandonment. It's not. It's about managing differently. It's about looking at land as productive through a new lens. Wales has changed so much, and so Sicily hasn't it? Historically, there was cropping there. You know, people grew black oats for their own stock. People grew corn. Undoubtedly, there would have been some form of market gardening or allotmenting for their own food production. And historically, people would have had a more diverse herd and flock. So I would imagine people would have had ducks and geese, chickens, horses to work as well as used as transport, and cattle. And cattle would have been used for dairy and meat, and you know, sheep, and keeping sheep just for lamb is a sort of fairly recent thing. I mean, obviously it depends on how far back you go, but you know, wool used to actually have value, so people kept sheep and milked them and took the wool, and then people more commonly ate hogget and mutton, you know, so kept the sheep to they were maybe 4 or 5 years old. And people had bigger families, didn't they? So people would have been in the longhouse, and you'd probably have 3 generations living there. Then instead of 1 or 2 kids, you'd probably have 4 or 5, wouldn't you? And everyone would be getting mucked in on the land. But then, you might have a labourer. Then you'd have a farrier, I suppose. You'd have someone maybe coming in and looking after the machinery. By and large, employment in agriculture has plummeted. You're lucky to get sort of 1.5 to 2 people employed on full-time on most farms. A lot of people have to take work elsewhere. Whereas with my experience of Adnish and Wildlife Trust, we've managed to increase employment. We've got more wildlife there than you'd have on a standard farm, and a greater diversity. You've still got rare species, which are not exclusive just to nature reserves. Obviously there are some farms that do things incredibly well, but I think that the number and the density are high. So we've got waxcaps, which are a form of grassland fungi that are rare on a global scale. And then the same with lichens, because the air has traditionally been of good quality here. Management doesn't introduce a lot of nitrogen or ammonia. And then we've got higher density of wildflowers in their meadows. If people have reseeded and they've got a ryegrass pasture that they're putting either artificial fertiliser on or a lot of chicken manure, you might find 3, 4, 5 species of grass and plant in a meadow. We're going to be looking more like 20 to 30 or even more on average in their meadows. Loads of insects need either grass or plants for their egg or larval stage, and then that in turn feeds everything else. Although we've had some losses, we've kept much more than the surrounding landscape because everything's changed around us. Generally speaking, sheep numbers are still higher than they were in the 50s, and there's fewer cattle, and the sheep species that are there generally, there's more mixing of European and stock and larger stock, and quite a few people even in that part of Wales have moved over to chicken sheds. So we have got concerns about the amount of ammonia that's in the air, as well as the amount of phosphorus that's going onto the land. And water quality in the Martex's variable. It's quite a flashy catchment, so if we get heavy rain it tends to charge through, so anything that's on the land there is going right down into there, and that these heavy rainfall events, they are potentially clearing out salmon reds, they're clearing out vegetation, and then if that is charged with excessive nutrients, it's making the recovery after these events, which are sadly getting more and more frequent, harder and harder. And I think that's the big thing that really concerns me, is that we're just seeing a compounding of all these different pressures on our land and on our systems. And, nature is in crisis. And the nature crisis is the worst sort of crisis because it's just such a slow burn affair. We need some land managed just for nature, or nature first. That might just produce a little bit of food. We do still then need food production, but we need diversified food production. Wales can grow vegetables. Market gardening is not an easy living, but neither is farming, but it does create more jobs, and nature management and rewilding creates more jobs. It'd be fantastic to see more people back in the countryside, because a future that we just carry on like we are, where there are fewer and fewer farms and more conifer projects or woodlands and offsetting programmes, is really dismal for Mid Wales.
No ordinary family farm can afford to farm now. You can't afford to buy the land, can you? You can't compete. Those Llanwrtyd Wales farms wasn't even an auction here in Wales. It was a big London company. We hear at Heathrow Airport. They haven't stopped their aeroplanes, but they just offset it and they get paid. So they buy up the land, thousands of acres, all fir trees. You walk in fir trees. What blinking nature and biodiversity is in fir trees? None. They don't live here, they don't pay taxes here, they don't support the local community, buying things from shops or the garage or maintenance or plumbers or electricians. They don't do nothing local. They're completely away from Wales. They buy it up, they have the capital, and then Welsh Government pays them because they're planting trees. Why can't Welsh Government just support local farmers instead of blaming us? It's called the Cambrian Mountains and it's beautiful. And it's our home. The biggest thing is, it's our home. We've been here generations. We love the place. We know we're only custodians for a short amount of time of it, but we've invested all our lives, our family heritage here, all the work. You know, to go out gathering just by yourself to shepherd with a dog that listens that you've bred and it's been trained, and you can go out with a pony and work the sheep, parting yours from your neighbours along the border of the farm. There are creatures up there, there are birds, bugs, bees, the lot. Bog asphodel, and it's carpets of yellow and heather purple. There's a place of 400 acres that you stand on it and it's shaking all around you. It's that wet, you know. It's just a beautiful, very fortunate thing to be able to do.
It's very sad because I do think we are very negative, but I think we've been put in that position to be negative. I'm only 31 and I'm thinking, you know, I've given up other jobs because I want to be here, and it's a hard place to be. So to want to be here and to be pushed up against a brick wall, sometimes you do ask why you're doing it, but it's because I know, and now I've had Evie, that I'd love to be able to give her this opportunity, you know, because I had such a brilliant upbringing, you know. I remember being super young here and having opportunities with my grandparents, mum, being able to play with ponies and sheep and the dogs and Angora goats, and all those things would never be possible without the way my grandparents and my mum is farming now, and we're farming together. So I do hope that we can carry on farming. For my sake, for Evie's sake, for Evie's kids' sake, if she ever has any, you know, but where do we stand?
Biggest threat to us has always been Cardiff or Senedd. Last September they stopped our Glassdeer payment, which was the environmental payment, just on a flick of a switch, and that was basically nearly 50% of our farm income. Then they also told us, when the Habitat scheme came out and when they looked at sustainable farming, oh yeah, you're 97% triple SI on your farm. And by the way, we're not going to pay anything for triple SI farmland. How more environmental is this? Triple SI hill, natural sheep, no inputs, no fertiliser, no intensive chicken, pig, dairy, nothing. We can't make a living out of sheep because you've told us to sell all our sheep to help the environment. So we've sold most of our sheep. We're down to a quarter of the sheep we used to have. Well, they took like building the dams. We don't call them lakes because lakes sounds pretty, like they're natural and it's a lake district. No, they're not. They were dams that were built to feed water to the English in Birmingham, which is absolutely fine because, of course, you know, people then did need clean water. But it's not respectful, is it, to Wales? They just got rid of people who have been there generations. And exactly the same can happen here right now. We've fed back in every consultation, isn't it? But it's a waste of time. Nothing you say is represented anywhere. I still have to pay rent. We've got the daughter, the granddaughter here. It's a total policy of upland clearance. All they want to do is just get rid of us. And I wonder, does the Welsh public even care whether we're here? We got so much work we want to do here. It's not just the land, but it's what's on the land as well. You would restore the peat, first and foremost, but that is so amazingly expensive and bureaucratic. I just said this, I had, peatland experts up here and natural resources experts up here, and I said, look, I've got this wool now. Used to pay the farm rent 40 years ago. Now it doesn't even pay its haulage. And I said, look, can I just get some natural Hessian sacks? And you want it blocked up. What if I just put them there? It would be great. Like Tregaron bog has been, I got told, well, you can't do that because your wool is a waste product. You're not allowed to do it. If we leave here, and there's this little one now, 3 months old grandchild here, if we could leave this eventually to her, if we can survive, we can sort out that peatland. So you can see the beautiful flowers and things in the summer. You can see the wet. We do have curlew here. We do have golden plover here. I have seen them, but I'm just a farmer, so it doesn't count. That if we can do something to re-wet bits of it, bring them back, and let people see that somehow, I just think that would be the best legacy ever. But it seems like they don't want us to do it. It's okay if it's a big company or, RSPB up in Lake Fernway or, the National Trust in Abergwesi. It's okay if you're a big company doing it, but if you're a farmer, you're not trusted to do it. And we want to do it, but we just need help.
When we came back from Switzerland just before the turn of the century, we set up a communications consultancy from our home, and we no longer needed to travel into London to work as I'd previously done. So we thought we could live everywhere, anywhere, and we thought that we would try to live somewhere in the countryside. We looked all over England and Scotland, and then we discovered Mid Wales, which we'd never been to before at all. We started to look on estate agents, and what we wanted was a house, no near neighbours, no near roads, no street lights, and just a little bit of ground. And just up the hill from Llangerrig, we found exactly that.
I'm from St Helman area. Colin's from Rhaeadr, it's family farm up Welsh Valley. My family farm, St Harman area, still do really. We came up here to, Colin had a job at Pantrain as a shepherd, and so we've been here ever since. There's not a lot here, but I think that's its beauty, isn't it? And I think that's what appeals to people when they do like it. The farming community, they stay put, don't they? They've got firm roots in the area, but you've got a good mix of all sorts of people coming from all over the place. A couple have moved in now recently, they're from South Africa. So, you know, if they make themselves get involved, well, they're part of the community, as far as I'm concerned.
So I grew up in a small town called Stellenbosch, which is the part of the wine region just outside of Cape Town. And Lexi grew up in what used to be the Transvaal, where she was born, and then moved down to Oudtshoorn, which is the centre of the ostrich farming area in South Africa. A lot of South Africans moved out of the country, well, after the end of apartheid. Obviously everyone was very happy by the fact that we were finally becoming a democracy, but at the same time there was a lot of affirmative action. So a lot of people in professional work lost their jobs, and we've been in the UK for about 14 years now. I work from home as a programmer for a university in London, and Lexi, my wife, she does care work, and so we were looking for a place in Wales. We found this, and that's it. It's a beautiful area. Everyone's really friendly. That's one of the things that struck us really, is how friendly everyone is. Very genuinely friendly.
Carnarvon would be like a patch of ground, wouldn't it? Like you wouldn't go far from your Carnarvon, like, innit, would it? Like, innit? Always thought I'd be back there one day, like, innit? Aberystwyth, we were brought up, like, innit? A little village, council houses, we'd just come back. Well, we were always up here at grandchildren, like, innit? Always up here, like, innit? And always wanted to be here, like, innit? That's all it has been, like, innit? Never wanted to be home, like, wanted to be up on the farm here, like, innit? Holidays we were always up, like, innit? Helping on the hay, bales, little bales, and rolling them and things, innit? Doing a bit with the sheep and things. Mother and father spoke Welsh, like, innit, and everywhere we worked down Namba was everybody spoke Welsh. You didn't hear much English, like, innit. Once you go back towards Steddwa, like, you start with people there speak Welsh, and down to Ponderwyd, you're mostly people who speak Welsh. All the farmers around there, like, innit, would be. And down this way, no, there's not many, not many at all, like, innit. They're Welsh, but they can't speak Welsh, innit? Well, she's a hell of a river when she's up in flood, like, innit? She will move. She took the bridge off in 47 when grandfather come over. He had the footbridge in Pengwaith there. He'd come over to get the shoppings, and when he went nearly back to the bridge went off in front of him. No, it's a nice river, like, innit? But there's not much fish in it.
You'd be lucky to see a salmon when you do like it, but no, years ago I reckon it was a lot of fish in it, like in it. I remember grandfather saying that he came home on a horse and cart once and he could hear something banging in the cart, and when he got to Tilly Light there was a salmon in it, and he doesn't know till that day who'd thrown it in.
There's something really lovely about walking from the source, or travelling under your own steam from the source of a river to wherever it enters the sea. I find that quite a moving experience. I don't know why, but I do. I mean, it's sort of a bit of a metaphor for life, I suppose.
Cambrian Mountains on the whole can be quite extreme, I think, because there's a lot of big farms and big acreages. Well, we are the highest. Well, Pumlumon Fawr is just the other side of our boundary, so that's the highest point of the Cambrian Mountains, which I think is 2, 3, 4, 6 feet above sea level. But all the hills up here now have been ring fenced. Difference, you go down the beacons where they still got flocks sort of mixing. So that side of the shepherding, I suppose, and gathering has been made a lot easier. Thank heavens. But this farm also, back in the 1800s, or perhaps earlier, had 3 major lead mines on it. So industry's always been in this part of Wales. The oldest lead mine in Wales is just in the Hafren, not very far from us. So now, you're going from lead mines now, and now what you find up in mid Wales now, and down home, is the wind farms. You know, people think, oh, we don't want them because they look unsightly. But you look at thousands and thousands of acres of forestry we've got, which is the most unsightly. They've built a wind farm from River Wye all the way down. I think it's already gone down to Neath, right? And first time I went down, and when I saw it, it just went up just like that. But now you don't think anything of it. It's the same as, there's a big wind farm across there, down in Llangurig. It's sticking up in the sky, it's part of the landscape. Once you get used to it, there's no problem with it, I don't think so. It's people afraid to take that step, I think. Once they take the step, they realise what is the problem. They want green energy, or do they want to stick to nuclear energy, which is green until something goes wrong? We can't stand still, basically. That's how I feel all the time. People want to stop things from happening, which is gradual progression. There's a lot of trees being planted here the last 2 years. If that's the way it's going to go, well, there's do you say you've got big farms like this? Perhaps I'd be better off planting in trees and allow the better ground to grow food. But then you can say, well, because they're big acres, should they have all the money? It's a difficult thing, because the pot is only a certain size where that money's been drawn from, you see, isn't it? I came here late autumn 1998, There were 3,500 ewes then, plus 50 head of cattle, and we're coming down. This farm was known for its Welsh blacks, and there's no cattle here anymore because basically of Environment Agency decided, oh, you can't graze them here, can't graze them there. Farms diversified into motorsports, so you can argue with all the trees that we planted around us, whether we got carbon capture through those trees, so it lends itself to the motorsport. It's one way diversifying, I suppose.
But like Sweet Lamb, I should think is very unique in the size of it. Must be about the biggest farm in Paris, would it be, or something? I think it's absolutely brilliant. Like, you know, I love the mountains, and I was born on the mountain, and Sweet Lamb is a bit like home as such in that respect. Like, I started on night rallies, which we were these roads like on the mountain here. There was a rally coming through there once a fortnight, and yeah, from that on, I had a car to drive around the fields when I was 12, and all I wanted to do was to get it sideways if I could, sort of thing. Like, that's still with me to this day, like, sort of thing, I'm afraid. Like, the self-built cars. I've only ever used a Talbot Sunbeam, converted with a Vauxhall engine in it, highly modified. It's back-wheel drive, so it goes sideways better. You know, you're out there for the enjoyment. The car is sliding, and that's why you go to do rallies, in my mind. You know, you've got the Escorts and the Sunbeams and the Chevettes. We're going back into 80s cars, sort of thing, but they're still loved in their rallying. On Sweet Lamb, you probably can get up to 80, 90 mile an hour in parts of it. If you go through a proper forestry, an Arctic lorry can go all the way through the forestry. There's places on Sweet Lamb you wouldn't want to be taking an Arctic lorry. You know, the corn is a lot tighter and things like that, sort of thing. But you know, it is a great place. I've spent many hours up there enjoying it. It's the nice open wide spaces. You know, yeah, the water, like the Wye, it's so pure up there.
It's in the winter up here when the water's spectacular. If you want to see water flow uphill, because we got these little streams joining the River Wye, and the wind catches them. They just blows it as if the water's going back uphill. It's the foam and they just blow back uphill, and it just swirls up, and it's something else. Like. When we get the northeasterlies blowing here, 3 or 4 days of northeasterly, everything is white because of the ice, and that's the weather I like. Like, I've seen it, this easterly wind is blowing, and the Wye was solid. The wind had blown it up into ridges, and it is like that for a few days. If you love your photographs, taking pictures, there's some beautiful pictures you can take up if you're here at the right time, isn't it? That's what the mobile phone is for. It's just as well you can't have reception up here just for taking photographs. I've been here 26 years now, and I've seen the change. The biggest change, I think, is the weather. There's certain areas when I first came here, you had to be careful where you went with the Land Rover or the truck. Now, you can go on them now with less risk of getting stuck for some. There's one gateway in particular. We used to go through that gateway in the winter, and you have to pick your spot. Since about the last 15 years, you can drive through it, no problem at all. It doesn't seem that there's less rainfall, but it's something happening. Snow, yes, we've had snow up here, but not as much as we used to have, I don't think so. But then, 2 years' time, we might have a dollop of snow. That's the trouble, you don't know when it's going to happen. It's not as regular as it used to be. If you're working on the land, you should have some sort of interest in your wildlife. Like the mergansers, are supposed to eat the trout and fish. Well, to me, up here, if we see mergansers up here, as far as I'm concerned, there's fish in the river. I'd be worried if I don't see them. The hills haven't got cattle on them anymore. The Millennia's taken over. In the spring, when it's fresh and young, cattle will graze it then. But as it gets older, because it's very, very tough grass and very serrated, they won't eat it. But the fact that you've got big animals walking through it helps control it, you see. We used to have curlews up here, we don't anymore. And I think that's because of the restrictions put on grazing, basically. Yes, you need some millennia there as cover for curlews and other ground nesting birds and mice and things like that, but too much of it isn't any good. You take owls, kestrels who hunt for small mammals, well, they'll have trouble finding those small mammals in that millennia. They've got to have an open space for them to come out to catch them. Well, that's my way of thinking. People have come along, you can't do this, can't do that, and this is what's happened, and
my first job was to try and work out what was wrong, and I have to tell you that it took me 10 years studying the Glaslyn Nature Reserve, but also more crucially really the surrounding mountains up at Pym, and it kind of came to us in a flash really. It was an inspirational moment where we realised that actually there's a catastrophe going on up there, a catastrophe in terms of the loss of wildlife, but there's also a catastrophe in terms of the loss of carbon in the soils, so that's a climate change issue. There's a catastrophe in terms of the economics of the farming up there. You look at the age of the farming community, there's a catastrophe waiting to happen there too. So actually it was clear that there wasn't one problem. There were lots of problems. At that point you could think, oh my goodness, how are we going to deal with this? This is beyond, but actually the second inspiration came to us, and of course it's obvious what the answer is. The way that farming has been pushed, it's not done the farming community any good, it's not done the wildlife any good, it's not doing the climate any good. This is unsustainable management of land, and the answer is sustainable land management, which is a really boring phrase, but essentially it means we need to get the landscape to support the farming community, because if the farming community are there to manage the landscape, then we can get that biodiversity back. Then that will support a diverse, rich ecosystem which will then protect us from climate change. It will stop the floods, it will sequester carbon away. So actually, the answer is really quite simple. You've got a peat bog. Very often the landowners, the farmers, were told that they had to plough it and they had to drain it. We had a guy who we worked with to block up the ditches in peatland, and the guy was like laughing to himself, and we said, well, when I was 17, me and my dad came up here and we made those ditches. And the truth of it is that, yes, life's cyclical like that, isn't it? I mean, it is, absolutely is. And essentially, society needed a highly productive landscape. But now, society needs something else. You know, water management or the healing of peat is actually a product. You look at the cost of floods in England, for example, coming out of Wales. Farmers are providing a service, they're managing flood water, and they could do so much more just with the right help. I tell you what, our only problem with the farming community is that we can't deliver enough funding to supply their interest to do these kind of managements. And that's a tragedy. Most problems we've had have actually come from the government and government agencies. We know farmers want to do this work. We know farmers can do the work. We know the process is necessary to measure how much they deliver. We now know the policies that are necessary to actually make that delivery financially worthwhile. We understand the economics of it. The answers are so simple, and yet we can't get enough kind of political buy-in to actually, well, literally, to pay the farmers to do the things that we as society need them to do. And you know, why not?
Oi! Wayne, come here. Honestly, you're not helping us at all. Come here, come on.
It's a very serious project.
Yourself, exactly.
Right, and you,
all we're gonna get is
come here now.
Yapping and snarling and trying to shag one another. Well, him trying to shag you.